I really got to sit down and do this update because some of my library books are overdue, and it's extra awkward when you have to send yourself a notice that says, hey girl, what up? Welcome back to my channel. And today I'm bringing you the April and May update for the Colour Me Reading Challenge that I created with Samantha Pans based on the Monochromatic Year created by KaliFab. I'll have both of them linked down below, as well as everyone else who has joined us on this journey. And there is still time, so if you want to hit some bookshelves, definitely hit either Samantha or I up and we'll add you to our group. So I have a total of 8 books to talk to you about today, which is a few, so this video might be a wee bit long. But let us start with the 3 books I managed to read in April. The April colour was yellow, and I managed to read 2 audiobooks and 1 hard copy. The first book I read was The Witch Hunter by Max Siak. Apologies if I've got that wrong, but this is a Nordic noir. First up, I would like to note that I listened to this book via audiobook, which straight away gave it a different feel and a different mood, I guess, than I would have had if I had read it myself. Especially considering that the main character, her name is Jessica, which is how it's pronounced within the audiobook, but visually in a Western society it is written as the same way that we would pronounce Jessica. So that straight away put me right in the mindset that this was set within a Nordic country. So the story follows main character Jessica, who is a police detective, and she is on a case where women are being murdered in ways that have been described by a specific author within the book. And they're trying to figure out who the killer is. And if you can't tell by the title, the series of books within the story are about witch hunting. So that's where this name's come from, and the fact that whoever is doing the killing is basically treating the victims like they are witches. And it's one of those things that you are left guessing who the killer could be right up until the end. I definitely would say I enjoyed the book. Nordic noir and noir in general are not my normal reading choices, but I definitely enjoyed this book and the direction that it took the whodunit storyline. It is the first book in a series about Jessica Niami, and at this point, though I enjoyed this specific book, I am unsure if I'm willing to go on with the series. But it is not something that is off the tables. I will say, if you enjoy Nordic noir, especially whodunits with a little bit of a twist, then I think this might be the book for you. It also has a healthy dose of drama and suspense. However, I will say there is a section between 2 characters when we're at the pinnacle moment of the story. And the question is, how are these characters going to get out of this situation? Where the next chapter jumps ahead and, you know, everyone essentially is out of danger, but you don't know how it happened, how they even got there in time, what is going on. You skip this whole main plot point. The whole main action, I guess, of the story is skipped. And from my point of view, I found that it built to this moment where you weren't sure if you were going to get out of this, and then end of chapter, new chapter, and all of a sudden you're getting bundled into an ambulance and you don't know how you got there or how you even managed to survive that situation. So for me, that was something I found quite jarring, especially because essentially your adrenaline had built up to this moment and it was just cut short without there being a climax to the building of the tension. But Overall, I enjoyed the book and I would recommend it to anyone interested in Nordic noir. The next book I read was Dark Archives, the librarian's investigation into the science and history of books bound in human skin. This is by Megan Rosenblum, and I guess it is a bit of a macabre topic. It's a book that very much talks about the history and the phenomenon that is books that are bound in human skin. And it follows a librarian, a medical librarian, Megan Rosenblum. It is a non-fiction book, and she basically discusses her journey of where her interest in books bound in human skin come from, and also it disperses some of the myths regarding how come they were created. I knew that human bound books were a thing, but I didn't know historically really more about them, and this book does leave a lot of questions because there is still a lot of mystery regarding the practice, but I did find it incredibly interesting, especially the sections that talk about that most identified or confirmed human bound books were actually created by like medical practitioners rather than the dark stories that I guess such a macabre activity and practice would entice. There are an idea in here as well about some human bound books were created by doctors, medical practitioners, etc. on people who had done quite vicious crimes, I guess, and as part of their punishment was that their body parts would be humiliated and used in such ways, which is an interesting concept in itself. But there's also a story in here about a convict who is on his deathbed, and they write a story of his life, and as part of what he wants is he wants a section of his skin to bind that book. So there is a book about this guy, his, I guess, autobiography, and it's bound in his own skin because he looks at it as a way that he can then live forever because his skin is out in the world bound around a book. And though I'm sure that there are many people out there who find that incredibly creepy, and I'm not 100% sure if I would like that done to me, I do find it an interesting concept because it's, on some levels, I think, similar-ish, not the same, obviously, but I guess it's that concept of when people get cremated and then people keep the cremated remains. I guess the difference is that instead of it being ash, it's a book bound in human skin. But it's an interesting concept nonetheless, and I do wonder, especially in such a death-positive world that we are heading into, is this something that we might see more of going forward? If this is something that you are interested in on a, I guess even as a macabre topic that might entertain at the next dinner party, I would definitely recommend reading this book. I found it quite easy to read, and I followed Rose Bloom's train of thought very well, and it was interesting to get her first-hand experience of such books. There is a section in here where she talks about the fact that she's handled many human-bound books, and she goes to a certain museum slash library, a state library, I guess is what you'd kind of see it as, a university library maybe. She goes to a library that has a piece of flesh, basically a piece of skin that's got a tattoo on it that's essentially in a little baggie, and she touches it and she finds it rather not a good time. It creeps her out a little bit and she feels very uncomfortable, but it's quite interesting because she handles human bound books more often than not. This is definitely a book that many will find disturbing, and there are quite strong opinions within this realm. It is a very, I guess, heated area of interest, especially for this librarian, because people view now remains, I guess, as different than they did in the past. That is not to say whether the past was right or the past was wrong, or that practices that took place then and now are different, because I'm sure there are many practices that happen now and are very common that in the future will possibly be frowned upon. But it is something that did happen and did occur, and it is always best to know your history as much as you can rather than trying to sweep it under the covers, because why pretend that things were one way when they were actually another? With that being said, if the macabre and the dark kind of history of things is of interest to you, I would definitely recommend this book. Like I said, it is very easy to read. It gives you a large perspective of different scenarios, and I wouldn't mind if she wrote a second book in this area once she discovers more and learns more about this particular topic. I would like to hear more about it. And the last book I got through for the month of April, the last yellow book, was Magic Bites by Iona Andrews. Please forgive me if I am just here butchering every name in the history of names. This is a fantasy book set in, I guess, a alternative universe, which has both electricity and magic. However, when the magic is strong, electricity is basically technology, essentially, is stopped. It's this weird world where you have one or the other. So the main character, Kate, she has both a magic-driven car and also a regular petrol-driven car. Mind-blowing. So Kate is a mercenary, a gun for hire, essentially, that has come obviously from a different family, and there is something special about Kate. This is the first book in the Kate Daniels series, so we get tidbits into her past and what makes her special compared to everybody else, because, you know, the main character always has to be unlike the other girls. But we are yet to really delve deep into what makes her different and why she is the way she is. It's also a bit of a whodunit story. You're looking for this main character that is a secret bad guy, but a lot of it also focuses on the politics, I guess, of this world, the different authorities within the world, and how Kate relates to all of these authorities, and how they work and function within themselves. I did decide to pick this book up because I'm a big fan of the Anita Blake series by Laurel K. Hamilton, and Goodreads suggested that this would be a book that is similar to that, a similar read. After reading the first book, I will say that I can see the similarities, and I am interested in going further with this series and seeing how her relationships build with the pack members and the vampires and the order and all those things, how those relationships ebb and flow around her. These kind of stories are probably one of my go-to reading plot lines, go-to tropes, I guess. I very much enjoy fantasy, especially books that take these ideas of vampires and werewolves and necromancers and witches and wizards and all those types of things and insert them into basically the regular world and see how those situations play off each other, and how you can make something as, I guess, alternative as magic fit within our current reality. Obviously, it does end up AU-like, but I enjoy books that kind of say, hey, imagine if magic was always there, or witches and wizards and vampires and werewolves and fae are all with things that we would associate and see within our everyday life. So those are stories that I definitely really enjoy. I'm a bit of a fantasy fanatic, I guess. So if you have any recommendations in that area that you can give me, please 100% chuck them down in the comment section below. So that means in April, for the color yellow, I was able to read 3 books, 2 of which were audiobooks, but I'm very happy with that number, and I am even happier with the amount of books I managed to get through in May. So the colour for May was white, and I actually got through 5 books, 2 of which, it may have been cheating slightly, but it had white on it. So let's start with the 2 audiobooks that I read, which are both within the same series. They're the Ruthless King series. You may remember I read the first book in this series back in January. So the first book is Defiant Queen. This is the second book in the series by Megan March, and it follows Kira Kilgore and her, I guess, budding, slightly non-con relationship with Lachlan Mount. So Lachlan Mount is our Ruthless King, and he is basically the underground royalty of New Orleans. And Kira Kilgore is a whiskey maker. She owns a whiskey distillery. She's the CEO, the boss. And her ex-husband, the relationship that she jumped into basically overnight, he got into a wee bit of debt to Lachlan Mount. And though Kira cannot financially pay him off without selling her whiskey distillery, which is a no-go considering it is a family legacy, he basically says to her, you can pay me off with yourself. And the story kind of bounces between this idea of sex and love, essentially, and where that all mushes together. So I will say the first book in the series is very Lachlan based. Lachlan is portrayed as very much the bad guy, and it's just kind of a fight. It's very much the setup book where you currently don't really know how it's going to go, but considering the genre that we are in, you do know where it's going to go, but that's a different story. And the goal at that point is literally just to get rid of her debt. Kira just wants to pay her debt off and get Lachlan out of her life. This second book, The Defiant Queen, is kind of that development from this relationship that's kind of a business deal to more of a, I guess, we kind of keen relationship. In this section is where we kind of start to learn more intricate details about Lachlan and how, yeah, he's a bad guy, but he's not that bad. And we start to learn more about Kira and how she can be quite feisty in and of herself. We do develop a bit of that in the first book, but in the second book we kind of further develop that and further build on her as her character and her, I guess, relationship within all that is going on around you. There are all these underlying stories and threads that yet haven't been connected, and at some points we don't even realize that they're loose threads that need to be connected. The end of this book does leave you in a situation where you kind of go, yeah, seen that coming, you know, can understand that this was the next progression within the story. And that then follows into the third book. So the next book I read, and the last in the Mount trilogy, is The Sinful Empire. It kind of ties up all the loose ends, and it does bring about all the resolution that has been kind of established. The things that have been established are resolved in this book. And it kind of sets up the future of Lachlan and Kira's relationship, and it still definitely ends on a ball where Lachlan is the king of the underworld essentially, and he is in a lot of ways really ruthless. He still has a heart, which Kira has obviously fallen for, because I don't know if I need to be given a spoiler warning at this point, but did you expect anything else? Because I sure didn't. And really, you go into those type of books wanting this kind of starry-eyed, even the devil has a heart kind of ending. Overall, I will say that I enjoyed the stories. I got right into Kira's storyline, though at times I found Kira to be annoying. Certain things that she did, I just don't understand. If you are in those situations, it's a very common line that happens in many of these type of books. But if you are in a situation, take some advice. Listen to reason. If the guy tells you, or the girl, or anybody else says to you, nay, nay, just calm your farm, calm that farm. Calm it. Just chill for a bit. Why you got to be running off with no information, thinking you know everything? Why are characters in these type of books always doing that? And then, even though they get themselves into some serious trouble, then the guy or the girl or whoever, someone comes in, saves the day, and then they're all like, oh shucks, you're just like that. It's alright, you ain't like the other girls. Why ain't anybody like the other girls? I say all that, and yet I continue to live and breathe these kind of books. So as I was saying, I finalized the Mount series, which I enjoyed immensely. I did give it 4 stars on my Goodreads. And I do think I would like to read more by Megan March. I have noticed that she has another series, the Savage Prince series, that is set within the same universe with Mount and Kira, and it revolves around some of the secondary characters that you are introduced to within the Mount trilogy. I have read, according to the Goodreads, that you can read both separately and you do not have to read them together. They are both standalone, but they are connected and within the same universe. So I definitely plan to continue with that and maybe even venture out into some other books by March. Following along with the Not Safe for Work books, I read A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. You may have noticed that Samantha Pans has also read this book, and that is because we are both now part of a book club that kind of focuses on the Not Safe for Work books, I guess is the best way to explain it. Have you ever noticed, just to say, yes, it's an erotica, it feels so like bad, like as if people are going to be there like. So for the last month, as part of that book club, we read A Touch of Darkness, which is the retelling of the story of Hades and Persephone. I'll say that though overall I enjoyed the book, it was a very easy read. I got right into the story. I was not a big fan of Persephone. She was another character, but she did it more than like Kira Kilgore. She made some bad choices, but when push come to shove, she listened to what those in the know told her. Persephone, on the other hand, who is another one of those virginal characters who are virginal and naive, and they have a good heart and they do things with the intention of trying to be a good person, but sometimes you're left wondering if they are actually a good person or they're just written that way. Persephone is one of those types of characters who runs off to do really stupid things because she thinks it's the right thing to do. And she's quite happy to be a goddess when it suits her, and she's quite happy to bow out when it also suits her. So the story is written from the perspective of Persephone, and she's a college student who has kind of got out from under the thumb of her mother. Kind of, not really, she's still kind of there, but she's got this little wee bit of touch of freedom, and she's out living her life. The one rule is she doesn't go anywhere near the gods, who do in fact live on Earth after some kind of rebellion or descent or something that they call it in the book. But she gets wrapped up in the idea of rebellion, as most people do, and she trottles off to Hades nightclub, where she proceeds to unintentionally but stupidly basically set herself up to being in debt with Hades. And there they proceed to obviously fall for each other. Not giving too much away, but I will say I do question Persephone as a person and whether she is actually as good intentioned as they first try to imply, as St. Clair tries to imply within the story. There's a whole storyline with her and her friend Lexa, who meets this guy. They both meet this guy and they become friends with him, and he works at the same news agency that same news agency as Persephone, and he essentially steals her article and publishes it under her name, but he still publishes it without her consent. And then she doesn't tell her friend Lexa, doesn't tell her BFF, and they go out with this guy as a friendship group, but they go out for a night out with this guy to celebrate the article, though she hasn't told her friend that, hey, Mr. Guy over here, he released that without my consent and it wasn't finished and I'm not happy with this situation. Like, why are you not telling your best friend that? Why are you not telling him? But then it gets worse because the night out goes bad and she just like goes, bye girl, and just leaves her bestie in a not great situation. How are you all up in here saying you're a great person, you're a good egg, when you're doing things like that? That's not a good egg. Or we're meant to essentially gloss over those sections. But there is a lot of situations and misunderstandings that occur that wouldn't occur if all characters, both primary and secondary characters, communicated better throughout the story. Communication is key to any good relationship, and I will say that Hades and Persephone and their lack of communication is teaching me even more so that this is true. If you are looking for a fun book that is kind of light on the not safe for work stuff, that does kind of reimagine the story of Persephone and Hades, I would recommend this book. However, in saying that, the author has released another series, a secondary series that runs basically parallel to this series, which is based from Hades' point of view. I have started the first book in that series. It's called A Game of Fate, though I'm finding it a little bit difficult to get through it because, like I said, I'm not a massive fan of Persephone, but a lot of the situations that are occurring actually, obviously, occurred in the other book I read in the first series, so I'm just kind of repeating it. I'm finding that a bit difficult, but I'm actually leaning, because I prefer Hades' point of view more, that if I continue with the series as a whole, I may continue with the Hades point of view and just leave the rest of the Persephone books to the wayside, essentially. Next, I read a graphic novel. This one, I read two actually, but we'll start with this one. This is Nancy Drew, A Palace of Wisdom. I really did enjoy this graphic novel. It is taking the regular Nancy Drew Hardy Boys characters and putting them into current day, and in saying that, some of the backstories for some of these characters are altered to fit the new kind of situation they're in. The art is stunning. I really do enjoy the way that all the characters are drawn and the illustrations within it. And I found the story really engaging. I will say one thing I would comment on is that Nancy, our girl Nancy, right here, also on the front cover here, she changes her outfits a lot, where other people will still be wearing the same thing and she's in this completely different outfit, and I'm thinking, when did you have time to put on them stockings? But other than that, and the fact that she does get shown to be a bit of a bad friend at times. There's a whole scenario where she goes to the library without telling anyone, doesn't take her phone with her, and she's uncontactable, and her friends really do worry about her. The overall, it is this story between discovering a mystery, because it's Nancy Drew obviously, but also the connection of friendship and childhood friendship and growing up and reaching that point in your life where you are a teenager, quite an older teenager I guess, and it is both a discovering yourself, discovering the killer, and relationships. The whole main story of this underall is talking about relationships and how you play off against each other. At this current point, I do not think there is a second in this series, though this book is left on a massive cliffhanger, so I very much would like to continue with it to see what happens with Nancy and her friends. And last but not least, we have Paper Girls. This is volume 1, and it is a story set back in the 80s with these paper girls. So they're girls who used to do the paper delivery run, and there is an alien invasion essentially. At this point, we do consider it an alien invasion. We are kept basically in the dark about what is happening. But we follow our paper girls here. It's a very odd book because overall, I guess I was left feeling I don't know what happened. I do not know what is happening. I just know that these girls are going off on the 1st of November to do their paper run super early in the morning. It's still dark out. And then all of a sudden there is these aliens, I guess, and you know, there's two different types of aliens, and you don't really know who is the bad guy and who is the good guy, and one of them is quite pretty and one of them is looking a bit, you know, cyborgy, and which one's the good one, which one's the bad one, and then, you know, stuff goes down and it's all just a whirlwind ride. But it does kind of have a bit of a end where something that happens at the start is at the end, and it's a different scenario, almost like a time flash, time warp, time travel style situation. But I would be interested in reading the second book to hopefully tie up, or the second volume, to hopefully tie up a few of the loose ends and really explain what is going on. It is a crazy ride, but I am definitely keen to see what happens next and hopefully see if some of the loose ends will be tied up, and if these paper girls come out triumphant in a situation that does kind of seem like there are no options. So those are the 8 books that I managed to read, and this is a very long video with maybe a few tangents along the way. And we are now moving into the month of June. So the colour for June is black, and I don't have any overall goals, but I am hoping to tick a few more books off of my to be read list. So until next month. So I'm Verity. That was the April and May Colour Me Reading Challenge. And now to the outro.